Marcus Aurelius said, "What we do in life echoes through eternity." What is your life echoing through eternity? Welcome to Echoes Through Eternity with Dr. Jeffrey Skinner. Our mission is to inspire, engage, and encourage leaders from across the globe to plant missional churches and be servant leaders. So join us and hear the stories of servant leaders reverberating lives as God echoes them through eternity. Brought to you by Missional Church Planting and Leadership Development and Dynamic Church Planting International.
Welcome into Echoes Through Eternity. I am your host, Dr. Jeffrey D. Skinner. What is God echoing through your life today? Well, today, our episode is entitled Roots to Reach. I want to begin with a couple of stories. One is lost and the other real. It's a small town I once visited. There was a church, gorgeous building that had stood for over 100 years. Generations had gathered under its steeple. The problem wasn't the structure, it was the culture. Over time, that church began to turn inward. Their meetings were less about mission and more about maintenance. When discussions about budget came up, the focus was almost always on how to repair the roof, how to refinish the pews, or replace them with chairs, or how to keep the organ running. They even considered changing their name a couple of times, but rarely was it about how to reach the neighborhood around them. Their vision narrowed, their priorities shifted, and eventually the congregation dwindled. That grand building, which once echoed with the gospel of hope, became a museum of what was, even a mausoleum. They had protected traditions but lost their mission. And as a result, they became dead inside. Contrast that with another church I know, not far from there. This congregation faced many of the same challenges: an aging building, declining attendance, and a shrinking budget. But they made the conscious choice to recenter everything around outreach. They asked, if we disappear tomorrow, would our community even notice? That single question, asked by a new pastor, shook them awake. They began evaluating ministries through the lens of mission. They started a tutoring program for kids after school. They opened their fellowship hall for community meals. Their worship service began including clear language for people who had never been in church before. Over the years, this outward posture brought new families, new believers, and a renewed sense of God's Spirit. The contrast couldn't be clearer. One church lived to preserve itself. The other lived to serve its mission. One drifted inward. The other became strategic. When we talk about shifting from an internal to strategic mindset, we're not just talking about leadership fads or the latest ministry buzzword. We're talking about the heart of Jesus' command. In Matthew 28:19-20, he says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you." Notice the verbs: go, make, baptize, teach. These are all outward strategic actions. They require movement beyond comfort zones. In Acts 1:8, Jesus says, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth." In a DCPI curriculum, there are 4 phases to a church plant, and this is when you're just starting out. Again, the trajectory is outward. Here, just as in Acts, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth. It's centrifugal. It's outward moving, beyond carrying. It's moving beyond the walls and carrying hope. I was saying in a DCPI curriculum of starting a church, phase 1 is Macedonia. So this is referred to as the Macedonia man when comes to Paul and calls him out, and this is the God to you phase. And this is your call and vision. Was Peter? Call and vision includes landmarks. And so then phase 2 is Ephesus, you to the team. This is where you gather and form the team. And then phase 3 is Jerusalem, the team to the church, establish and birth the church. And then phase 4, Antioch, the church to the world, where you send and multiply. And this is where you start birthing new churches. And the whole point of that is that when you plant a brand new church, you plant it with a multiplication mindset, because we know that churches tend to drift inward. Just over time, that happens, especially once you get a building, which is another reason I'm not encouraged that to be the very first thing that a brand new church acquires is building, because then comes with that maintenance and then an inward focus as well. Churches that drift inward forget that the New Testament picture of the church is not a club for insiders, but a launching pad for missions, teaching why churches drift inward, why do churches naturally turn inward. Kevin Harney is blunt about it in Organic Outreach for Churches. He says the gravitational pull of any organization is towards self-preservation. There's a fear of loss. Members worry about losing traditions, influence, or comfort, so they close ranks. They worry about maintenance mindset. It feels easier to preserve what we have than to risk something new. Misplaced priorities, budgets, and time are consumed by internal concerns, keeping members happy rather than reaching the lost. Exhaustion. When leaders are tired, they default to maintaining rather than visioning. The result is the church forgets and when you forget your why, you lose your way. So how do we align our vision in planning with outreach? We shift from internal to strategic requires intentionality. It won't be done by accident. Reframe every question. Instead of asking, do our members like this, but begin asking, will this help us reach people far from God? Budget with mission in mind. A budget is a theological document. It tells you what you believe matters most. If outreach isn't funded, it isn't prioritized. 3, set measurable goals. How many people will we invite this year? How many community touch points will we create? Specific goals, focus energy. And when I say touch points, I'm talking about you going into the community, not just a vacation Bible school or a Christmas program for people to come and see. You can do both. Or evaluate ruthlessly. Be completely honest about what you're doing and whether or not it's effective. If a ministry exists only to serve insiders, it must be retooled for mission and released. And it has to be effective. If it's not working, don't do it. And working is not just defined by numbers either. It's defined by faithfulness. Tell stories of missions. Celebrate baptisms, testimonies, and community impact. Stories to remind people why we exist. Strategic thinking doesn't mean becoming cold or corporate. It means being deliberate. Jesus himself set his face forward to Jerusalem. Paul made plans to reach Rome. Strategic alignment is not business talk, it's biblical obedience. Here's some practical strategies for churches' mission audit. Once a year, gather leaders and ask, how does this ministry align with our call to make disciples? Community engagement. Create spaces where the community intersects with the church, family nights, ESL classes, food drives. Staff and volunteer roles. Ensure at least one key leader has outreach on their title or responsibility. Pray outward. Incorporate prayer for neighbors and unreached groups into weekly worship. And language matters. Use clear, accessible language in worship and communication that makes sense to seekers. Don't just use inside baseball talk. Some application for questions and leaders for answers. Turn the mirror on ourselves. Ask leaders, pastors, and believers. We must wrestle with these questions. How does each ministry in our church reach the lost? If our church closed its doors tomorrow, would our community notice? Are we spending more energy keeping insiders comfortable than reaching outsiders with the gospel? What traditions or programs might we need to release in order to embrace mission? I'll remind you here that sacred cows make excellent hamburgers. It's not enough to just agree with the philosophy. The Spirit calls us to examine honestly. Are we strategic or are we drifting? My prayer for you guys today is that begin to ask yourselves, or tell yourselves that Jesus is the head of the church. And so ask him to forgive you for the times that you've turned inward. Focus more, and you have focused more on your comfort than on your commission. Confess when you have slipped into maintenance mode, to preserving traditions while forgetting your mission. And then commit to renewing your hearts. Pray for the Lord to help you align your vision and your budgets and your ministries and your lives with your great command to make disciples of all nations, to send you out in the power of the Holy Spirit and remind you that you're not a club for the saved, but a mission outpost for the lost. Well, that's the end of today's episode. Well, we hope you enjoyed this. If you're listening today, please share with your friends and neighbors and family members if you found this valuable here. And as always, ask yourself, what is God echoing through your life today?